Hi everyone, I'm Donna and thanks for joining me for this Fox 16 Web Extra. This is a follow-up to my special reports on clemency, the story about Shirley Danner, who has served nearly 40 years of a life sentence in prison for murder with no chance of parole. Her daughter, Tonia Griffin, was 2 years old when her mother was incarcerated, and those early years were especially difficult for her. And I know there are others dealing with this exact same thing. So today, I'm talking with an expert on how we can help families, especially children, who have a parent behind bars. Joining me now is Deanne Newell. She heads up Arkansas Voices for Children Left Behind. Thank you for joining me for this Web Extra.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
Tell me about your organization. What is Arkansas Voices for Children Left Behind?
It's a nonprofit that was established in 1994 with 32 different nonprofits coming together as we began to see the tripling of the number of women who were incarcerated during the decade of the 90s. We also doubled the number of men in prison during the same decade. There are 9 times more men in prison than women, but we began to see this terrible impact on the children of the incarcerated mothers. So the organization began, we had Rockefeller funding. We went out and studied the families of the mothers who were incarcerated in the Department of Corrections here in Arkansas, and indeed the moms were right. These kids and families were holding on by their fingernails. So we began to craft services and interventions to support the families and the children.
So what kind of services are we talking about here?
Well, it's an array of services. It includes, we've done parenting in the prison and in the jail since 1992. Then we have services for the caregivers of the children who, in the case of moms in prison, it could also be not just dad, but a grandparent or a relative caregiver. So we have support groups around the state for kinship caregivers of the children. We have a moms group for mothers who are caring for the children while the dad is absent. We don't have a dad's group. We have children's support groups, which have shown to be pretty powerful interventions. We do a lot of expressive activities with the children because oftentimes these children have never ever shared
How they
their
feel.
experience and their feelings.
Now this is very interesting because I want to get into Tonia Griffin, who's now 41 years old. And like I said, she was 2 years old when her mother was sent to prison. Her family, in fact, there were 3 children. They were split up and went to various family members. But they lied to her initially and told her that her mother was off in school. And then someone, her sister, like down the road, she was much older, her sister came back and said, no, your mother is not in school, she's in prison. And there was that disconnect, not understanding, because no one had prepared her for that. She believes that children aren't lied to as much as they were back then, but are they? Are they still told?
Children are lied to, and it is very dangerous. They do it out of a sense of protection sometimes, but also sometimes the parent doesn't want to disclose that they have actually violated the law, that they're in the eyes of the community a criminal. I've heard being at school, working in a factory, traveling, children have jackrabbit ears, almost every one of them. So if they find out indirectly, there's a lot of harm due to the chaos and confusion of being deceived.
It can have a devastating effect and a long-lasting effect.
So we teach them now to tell them a truth that's fit to tell. So what you tell little children are things like, Mom and Dad is in grown-up timeout. Kids get that. They understand that.
They're in trouble.
Right.
They're in trouble.
They've done something they shouldn't have done. Grown-up timeout. As they get older, you reframe that where there's a better understanding. But and then if kids come visit and there are guards and there's barbed wire,
right,
and you think you're sneaking this through to the children, but it's painful. And more importantly, it's painful for them to find out that they've been deceived.
Children are smarter than that.
Yeah.
Let's hear an excerpt from an interview with Tonia Griffin where she talks about her feelings about all this. Take a listen.
You can't judge a child because of what their parents have done. You can't look at them and say they're going to do the same thing, because I haven't, and my sister and my brother haven't.
And that's one of the things that Tonia went through, the fear of people judging her. I mean, her mother was a prostitute. She killed a man, which is hard enough for a child to have to hear that their parent did this. But then her fear was people are going to look at me and they're going to say, I'm going to do the same thing. And I guess in some cases, people really do tell children that.
Unfortunately, that goes on. The stigma, the sins of the parents being visited on the children is commonplace because we so demonize people who have committed crimes that we forget that they're somebody's mother or father or sister or daughter. And that sort of demonization is visited on the children. I mean, the hardest job I have, and the one I don't have a good resolution for, is when children come to me and say, my best friend's parents won't let me be friends with them anymore.
I have to believe, though, that when you tell a child that you're going to turn out just like your mom or just like your dad, then that child is probably going to turn out just like their mom and their dad.
I think it's
it
a
can work
very
both ways, in a negative way or a positive way.
It's a very painful thing for a child to hear. Plus, they're already thinking it anyway. Okay. I've taken children to visit their dads at Wrightsville that they've never met before, who are in prison. They're very curious. But part of their curiosity is, am I like you? Mm-hmm. Is there something, that's going to compel me to be incarcerated as well?
That's just a natural thing. I want to move on here now to another excerpt from Tonia Griffin. Take a listen to this one. How do we come to grips with that? How do we understand that better? And what can we offer people?
Love, understanding, compassion. Because not only are they dealing with the fact that their mother is, or their parent is incarcerated, but they're dealing with the fact that these eyes are on me. Am I going to turn out like my parent turned out? And forgiveness. Because a person makes a mistake, should they be punished for the rest of their lives for this mistake? If they have proven that they have changed, I know some people say people don't change, but I am a living witness that people do change.
Yeah, and she's talking about, all eyes being on her, but she's also talking about her mother and the fact that people do change. Shirley Danner, her mother, is asking for clemency. She's asked 21 times for clemency and hasn't been granted it. And we're waiting to hear what the governor is going to say this time around. But you were telling me that sometimes these incarcerations can just go on for too long.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a tendency in this country, but out of politics, to harshen criminal sentences in the name of being tough on crime. Mm-hmm. So we end up really losing great human capital. I know Shirley Danner. Mm-hmm. She ran the library at the prison. She's a wonderful human being. I know lots of lifers that I consider my friends and some of the best people in this whole world. Mm-hmm. Yes, they've done something terrible, but the idea that people cannot redeem themselves is really abhorrent to me, because I see people go through amazing transformations. And I think what her daughter is saying is that my mom, is really a decent person. Mm-hmm. She did something very bad, but that does not convert her into a bad person. Yeah. And it's so hard to separate any child, even a child who's lost their parent at age 2 and has not really been, had a parent in their daily life. The image of that parent as some kind of demonic criminal is not what they experience. Yeah. And the idea that we're preaching forgiveness all over the place, and yet, in most Western countries, there is no such thing as a natural life sentence, where they give a certain lengthy number of years, but they do not ever turn off the light at the end of the tunnel, as we do. And it's costly. I mean, it is very expensive to keep somebody in prison for life.
Well, Deanne, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here, but I am so glad that you were able to come today and just kind of shed some light on this issue. I know there's so much more we can discuss, but in case you're interested in learning more about Deanne Newell's organization, it's called Arkansas Voices for Children Left Behind. There's the information for you, the mailing address, the phone number, as well as the website where you can learn more about the organization. I'm Donna Terrell. Thanks for tuning in to this Fox 16 Web Extra. We'll see you on Fox 16 News.